The sun was still rising when Ethan Cole reached the small desert town after many days on the road. His horse walked slowly, tired from the long journey, and Ethan could feel the dry wind on his face. The town was not large, but it was noisy that morning. People were talking. Music was playing somewhere, and colorful flags were hanging across the street. A traveling carnival had arrived the day before, and almost everyone in the town was excited to visit it. Ethan didn't plan to stay long. He only wanted to rest his horse, drink some water, and keep moving. But as he rode through the main street, he noticed children running around with cotton candy, women looking at handmade jewelry, and men gathering around different game booths. Something about the energy around him made him slow down. After weeks of silence on the open road, the lively sounds felt strange but somehow welcoming. He tied his horse near a small shop and walked toward the carnival. He moved quietly, observing everything the way he always did. Ethan was never the loud type. He liked to look, listen, understand. As he walked past booths selling food and toys, one particular booth caught his attention not because of the prizes or the lights, but because of the crowd standing around it. There were rows of glass bottles stacked in a neat pyramid. A man with a loud voice was shouting to draw people in. Step right up. Try your luck. Hit all the bottles and win the grand prize. Ethan didn't think much of it at first. Carnival games always had bright signs and promises. But then he heard something that made him stop walking. Hit all these bottles and you'll win an Apache girl. The words felt heavy in the air. Ethan frowned and stepped closer, trying to understand if he heard correctly. The man running the booth stood beside the pyramid of bottles. He was short, with a big hat and a confident smile. His voice was sharp, loud, and practiced, clearly someone who liked attention. His name, according to the sign painted behind him, was Harlan Briggs. Beside the booth, sitting quietly on a wooden stool, was a young Apache girl. She looked no more than 16. She wore a simple dress and kept her hands folded on her lap. Her long black hair was tied loosely behind her, and her eyes watched the ground, almost as if she didn't want to be seen. Ethan felt something shift inside him. The scene didn't feel right. It felt wrong, unfair, and painful to even look at. The girl did not look like a prize. She looked tired, quiet, and distant, as if she had been sitting there for a long time. People around the booth were talking, laughing, and pointing at the bottles. Some looked at the girl with curiosity, others with pity. But no one seemed to say anything about the sign. Ethan took a slow breath and walked closer. Harlan noticed him immediately. "Hey there, cowboy," Harlan shouted with a grin. "You want to try your aim? 3 throws for $2. Knock down the whole set, and she's yours." Ethan didn't like the way the words sounded. It felt disrespectful, like the girl was not a human being but an object. He looked at her gently, trying to catch her eyes, but she didn't lift her head. "What's this all about?" Ethan asked calmly. His voice was low but firm. Harlan laughed loudly. "It's exactly as it says. She's the prize. Folks around here like a little excitement. And she don't mind. Do you, sweetheart?" The girl didn't answer. She only looked down, her fingers tightening slightly. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. Everything in him told him this was wrong. But he didn't want to cause trouble without understanding the situation fully. He stepped slightly closer to her and lowered his voice. "You okay?" he asked gently. The girl gave the smallest shake of her head. It was so slight that someone standing far away wouldn't have noticed. But Ethan saw it. Harlan clapped his hands. "Come on, cowboy. Show us what you got. Unless you're too scared to try." People nearby laughed. Ethan knew they weren't trying to be cruel. They simply didn't understand the reality of the situation. Most of them saw it as entertainment because that was how Harlan presented it. Ethan looked at the bottles again. The game seemed simple, too simple. He had seen enough carnivals in his life to know most of these games were tricked in some way, and yet the prize was something that should not have been there. He spoke clearly. "I'll try." The crowd cheered, and Harlan rubbed his hands together, smiling widely. Ethan paid the fee and stepped into the marked area. Harlan handed him 3 small throwing balls. "Let's see if the cowboy has steady hands," Harlan said loudly. Ethan focused. He wasn't aiming to win a prize. He was trying to understand the situation. His first throw was strong and accurate, hitting the top row of bottles. A few bottles fell, but strangely, the whole structure didn't move much. Usually, when the top row fell, the bottles below would shake or slide. But these hardly moved. Ethan narrowed his eyes. He threw the second ball, aiming at the middle row. Again, the bottles shook but didn't fall. Something felt wrong. His third throw hit the bottom row. The sound was solid, too solid, like the bottles were fixed tightly. He stood still for a moment. "It's a trick," he said softly. Harlan laughed loudly. "Better luck next time, cowboy. Maybe you should stick to riding horses." One. People in the crowd chuckled. Ethan didn't react. Instead, he walked back to the girl. He crouched slightly, so he wasn't towering over her. "What's your name?" he asked. After a moment of hesitation, she whispered, "Naya." Her voice was soft, almost too soft to hear. "How long have you been here?" Ethan asked gently. She looked up for a brief second, just enough for him to see her tired eyes. "Many weeks," she whispered. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression calm. He didn't want to scare her or make her feel pressured. Harlan stepped forward. "Move along, cowboy. She's not here for conversation." Ethan stood up slowly. "You don't treat people like a prize," he said. Still calm but steady. Harlan smirked. "This is my business, and the law ain't got any problem with it here." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Some seemed unsure now, as if they were seeing the scene differently after Ethan spoke. Ethan didn't shout. He didn't argue. Instead, he looked back at Naya and said softly, "I'll help." Her eyes widened ever so slightly, as if she couldn't believe someone said that out loud. Ethan walked away from the booth slowly, thinking deeply. He knew he needed to do something, but he also knew he couldn't act without a plan. A situation like this needed care, patience, and the right approach. He didn't want to cause Naya any more trouble or fear. He wanted to find a way to help her safely. As the noise of the carnival continued behind him, Ethan stepped aside into a quieter street. He looked back only once more at the booth. Harlan was busy calling out new customers. Naya was sitting quietly again, her eyes lowered. Ethan made a promise to himself in that moment. He wouldn't leave the town until Naya was free, then did not leave the carnival after his first attempt at the bottle game. Instead, he walked around quietly, watching the booths, the people, and especially Harlan's behavior. He wanted to understand more before doing anything. He knew rushing in without thinking could make things worse for the girl named Naya. She looked too fragile for sudden actions, and Ethan didn't want to bring her any harm or worry. The afternoon sun began to warm the ground, and people gathered in larger numbers. Children laughed, families shared snacks, and music from a nearby band filled the air. It looked like any happy carnival, but Ethan's mind kept returning to Naya. While everyone else enjoyed themselves, she sat silently on that wooden stool, her hands folded together, her eyes fixed on the ground. Ethan walked closer again, pretending to look at another booth so he could observe carefully without drawing attention. He watched how Harlan treated the customers. Harlan was friendly when he wanted to be, loud and cheerful when it helped attract people, and strict when someone questioned his game. He acted like a showman, always trying to keep the crowd entertained. But every time he looked at Naya, Ethan noticed something cold in his eyes, something that made Ethan's heart feel heavy. A few men from the town tried the bottle game. All of them failed. Ethan paid close attention to the bottles this time. He already suspected something strange, but now he was almost sure the bottom row was fixed. The bottles did not move even when hit directly. They stayed too steady, like they were attached to the table. One man laughed and said, "I swear I hit those bottles hard enough to knock them all down." Harlan just shrugged and said, "Maybe next time." People laughed, and the game continued. No one seemed to question the odd behavior of the bottles for long. It was a carnival. After all, people came to play, not to investigate. But Ethan's concern was not the game, it was Naya. He walked around the booth once more, acting like he was simply enjoying the sights. As he passed the backside of the booth, he noticed a small table with glue, ropes, and a few tools placed carelessly. That explained everything. The bottles were held in place. Ethan took a slow breath, feeling his suspicion confirmed. He walked back to the front. Naya was still sitting quietly. This time, Ethan stood far enough not to attract Harlan's attention, but close enough for the girl to hear him if she wanted to speak. He waited for a moment until she slowly looked up, just a little. "You said you've been here for many weeks," Ethan said softly. "Do you have anyone who might be looking for you?" Naya hesitated. Her voice was small when she finally spoke. "My family. They live far from here. We moved often." Ethan nodded kindly. "Do they know where you are?" She shook her head slowly. "No. I was traveling with someone. Then I was taken away. I didn't know where to run." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Her words were soft but filled with sadness and fear. He didn't ask for details. He didn't want her to remember painful moments. Instead, he focused on what he could do now. "I'm going to help you," he said in a gentle tone. "You're not a prize. You shouldn't be here." For the first time, Naya raised her eyes and looked at Ethan fully. Her eyes showed a mix of hope and disbelief. She seemed as though she wanted to trust him, but was afraid to. "What if he won't let me go?" she whispered. Ethan understood her fear. Harlan was a man who liked control. He wasn't loud for no reason. He wanted to be the center of attention, and he wanted people to obey him. Removing Naya from his booth wouldn't be an easy task. Ethan didn't want to promise something impossible, so he said only what he knew to be true. "I won't leave until you're safe." Naya lowered her eyes again, but Ethan saw a small spark of relief in them. Before Ethan could say more, Harlan stepped forward with a wide smile. "Cowboy, you're back. You ready to try again?" Ethan forced a polite smile. "Just watching for now." "Well, don't stand too close." Harlan laughed. "You'll scare away my customers with that serious face." The crowd around them laughed lightly, thinking it was a harmless joke. Ethan simply nodded and walked away, not wanting to cause a scene. His mind was working quickly now. He needed to think of the safest way to help Naya, and that meant understanding the law and the people of the town. He walked to a nearby shop, where an older woman stood behind the counter, selling small handmade items. She had been watching the carnival from a distance, with a thoughtful expression. Ethan greeted her politely. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" The woman looked at him carefully, as if trying to read his intentions. "Depends on what you're asking," she said calmly. "That booth over there," Ethan began, keeping his voice low. "The one with the bottles. The girl sitting there. Do people here know her situation?" The woman sighed softly. "Most people don't want to know," she said. "They see a carnival game, and nothing more." She paused. "But I've seen that girl. She doesn't look happy. Never has." Ethan appreciated the honesty. "Doesn't the sheriff care?" he asked. The woman shook her head. "Sheriff likes quiet days. If there's no loud trouble, he doesn't go looking for it." Ethan understood. Some sheriffs were active and fair. Others preferred to avoid conflict, unless absolutely necessary. This sheriff sounded like the second type. "Is Harlan from this town?" Ethan asked. "No," she replied. "He comes with the carnival every few months. He stays for a few days, makes his money, and moves on." Ethan nodded slowly. That meant Harlan didn't have strong roots here, which could work in Ethan's favor. If he could get even a few townspeople to speak up, the sheriff might listen. The woman leaned slightly closer. "If you plan on helping that girl," she said quietly, "you'll need to move carefully. Harlan likes control, and he doesn't like people questioning him. But you seem like someone with a strong sense of right and wrong." Ethan nodded. "I won't cause trouble." he assured. "I just want to help her." "Two," the woman gave him a soft smile. "Then you'll need others to stand with you. Alone, it's too difficult. But with a few voices, the sheriff might finally act." Ethan thanked her and walked outside again. The sun was now high in the sky. He knew what he needed to do. Find people who quietly disagreed with what was happening but were afraid to speak up. He walked around the carnival and the nearby shops, listening to conversations. Some people ignored him, some were unsure, and some were curious. It took time, but slowly Ethan found a few people who didn't like what they saw at Harlan's booth. One man who sold fruit shook his head when Ethan mentioned the situation. "I always thought it looked wrong," he said. "Someone should say something." A young woman carrying her child said softly. "That girl looks sad every time I see her. She shouldn't be part of a game." An older man, standing near the well, told Ethan. "Harlan's booth has been a problem before, but no one wants to get involved." These small comments gave Ethan hope. People were not cruel, they were just uncertain, unsure how to take action. Ethan gathered 4 or 5 of them quietly and spoke with them behind a shop where it was peaceful and away from the crowd. He explained his plan gently. "We need to talk to the sheriff," Ethan said. "Not with anger, not with accusations, just with truth. If several people speak together, he will have to listen." The group hesitated at first. People feared confrontation, even polite confrontation. But Ethan's calm voice and sincere eyes helped them feel safe. After a moment, they agreed. Ethan thanked them. He returned to the carnival and watched Naya from a distance. She didn't know what he was doing, but he hoped she could feel a small piece of hope. Before the day ended, Ethan made one more promise to himself. He would return in the morning with the sheriff, not alone. Naya would not sit on that stool forever. Ethan would make sure of it. The next morning came with a soft, golden light spreading across the small desert town. Ethan woke early, even before most shops opened. He washed his face at the town's well, adjusted his hat, and took a deep breath. Today mattered. Today he hoped to bring real change not only for Naya, but for the town too. Across the street, the carnival was still quiet. Only a few workers were setting up booths, arranging signs, and preparing for another busy day. Naya was not there yet. Ethan felt both relief and worry. Relief because she wasn't sitting alone on that wooden stool in the early morning cold. Worry because he didn't know where Harlan kept her during the night. But he pushed those thoughts away gently. He needed to stay focused and patient. Ethan walked through the town until he reached the sheriff's small office. The building was simple, with a wooden door, a single window, and a worn sign that said Sheriff's Office. A few people Ethan had spoken to yesterday were already waiting outside, just as they had promised. The older woman from the shop, the fruit seller, the young mother, and 2 other townspeople stood together, looking a little nervous but determined. Ethan nodded at them with appreciation. "Thank you for coming," he said softly. The older woman smiled. "Someone needs to do what's right." Ethan pushed open the sheriff's door. The sheriff, a middle-aged man with a calm face and slow movements, looked up from his desk. He seemed a bit surprised to see several people visiting this early. "Morning," the sheriff said with a gentle sigh. "What brings all of you here?" "Go Donja Stocky." Ethan stepped forward and spoke respectfully. "Sheriff, we need to talk about something important. It's about the girl at the carnival booth." The sheriff leaned back slightly, rubbing his chin. "The carnival?" he asked. "Did someone cause trouble?" "No, sir," Ethan said. "The problem is not noisy or aggressive. It's quieter than that, and that's why it was missed." The sheriff looked at the group, then motioned for them to speak. One by one, the townspeople explained what they had seen over the past days and weeks. None of them raised their voices or blamed anyone loudly. They simply shared the truth. The girl looked unhappy. She was treated as part of a game, and something didn't feel right about the whole situation. The young mother spoke last. Her voice was soft but full of sincerity. "Sheriff, that girl doesn't smile. She sits there all day. And when I walked past yesterday, she looked lost. She's not a carnival toy. The sheriff listened carefully. He didn't interrupt. When the group finished, he folded his hands together on the desk and let out another long breath. I appreciate all of you coming, he said slowly. But I have to be sure before I act. Carnivals come and go. Folks don't always understand their ways. And I don't want to accuse someone without reason. Ethan stepped forward with quiet confidence. Sheriff, I understand your concern, but I went close and looked carefully. The bottles in the game are glued down. It's not a fair game. And the girl, her name is Naya, told me she has been there for many weeks. She is not there by choice. The sheriff raised his eyebrows slightly. She spoke to you? Yes, Ethan said. She said she wants to go home. But she doesn't know how. Silence filled the room for a moment. The sheriff looked at the townspeople again. Their faces showed honesty and real worry. This wasn't a false complaint. It wasn't gossip. These people genuinely cared. Finally, the sheriff stood up. All right, he said firmly but gently. Let's go see what's happening. The townspeople sighed with relief. The older woman placed a thankful hand on Ethan's arm before they all walked outside together. The sheriff joined Ethan, and the group walked toward the carnival. The sun was higher now, and the place was waking up. People were beginning to gather. Music started playing slowly, and colorful flags waved in the warm breeze. When they reached Harlan's booth, Ethan noticed Naya sitting on the wooden stool once again. Her hands were folded, and her eyes stared at nothing in particular. She looked tired, like someone who had not slept well. When she saw Ethan approaching with the sheriff and others, she looked confused, almost afraid. Ethan gave her a small, reassuring nod. Harlan came out from behind the booth with his usual wide smile. Sheriff, he called loudly. Good morning. What brings you here? Want to try the game? The sheriff didn't smile back. Morning, Harlan. I need to talk to you. Harlan's smile dropped slightly. Talk? About what? Ethan watched Harlan closely. His expression changed quickly, friendly at first, then cautious, then slightly annoyed. Harlan liked situations he controlled. This was not one of them. The sheriff nodded toward Naya. It's about the girl. Harlan let out a forced laugh. Oh, come on. She's just helping with the booth. Folks enjoy the show. The sheriff shook his head. People here say she looks unhappy. They say she isn't here willingly. Harlan's face tightened, but he kept his voice loud and cheerful. Oh, she's fine. Aren't you? He asked Naya loudly. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked at Ethan, then at the sheriff. Her hands trembled slightly. Harlan stepped closer, blocking her from view. She's just shy, Sheriff. No trouble here. The sheriff held up his hand calmly. That's enough. Step aside. For a second, Ethan thought Harlan might refuse. His jaw tightened, and his fingers curled slightly. But then he stepped aside slowly. The sheriff crouched a little so he wasn't towering over Naya. He spoke gently, like someone speaking to a child who needed comfort. You can talk to me, the sheriff said softly. Are you here by choice? Naya looked at the sheriff. Her lips trembled. She tried to speak, but the words didn't come. Not at first. Then a single small answer escaped her mouth. No. The townspeople watching became silent. Ethan felt a deep breath leave his chest. The sheriff nodded kindly. Thank you, he said. Harlan stepped forward quickly. Now wait just a minute, she doesn't know what she's saying. She's confused. The sheriff raised his hand again. Harlan, I said enough. Harlan stopped talking, but his eyes darted around nervously, as if searching for a way out. The sheriff looked at the bottles next. Are these glued down? Harlan forced a laugh. What? No! That's ridiculous. The sheriff touched the bottles himself. They didn't move. They didn't even wiggle. He turned back to Harlan. This is not an honest game. Harlan started to speak, but the sheriff gently placed a hand on his arm. Harlan, he said in a calm but firm voice, I can't ignore this. You'll need to come with me. We'll talk more at the office. The townspeople whispered among themselves. Some looked surprised, others relieved. Ethan simply stood quietly, watching Naya. She still looked unsure, as if she didn't believe what was happening. "It's all right now," Ethan whispered softly to her. "You're safe." For the first time since Ethan met her, Naya's eyes softened. She gave the smallest nod, her lips pressing together as if she were holding back tears, not of sadness this time, but of relief. The sheriff guided Harlan away from the booth. The crowd slowly began to understand that something serious had been happening right under their noses. Ethan stayed beside Naya. He didn't touch her or move too close. He simply stayed near enough for her to feel safe. "You did very well," he told her gently. "What will happen now?" she asked in a quiet voice. "You'll be taken care of," Ethan said softly. "You won't sit on that stool again. And we'll find a way to help you return to your family." Naya breathed out shakily, a small sign that the heavy weight she carried was finally beginning to lift. As the morning sun warmed the ground, Ethan knew the turning point had come. The truth was out, and Naya's life was about to change, not because of luck or chance, but because people chose kindness, courage, and honesty. And Ethan felt certain this was only the beginning of a much better path for her. The final stage of his journey began quietly, without any loud announcement or major sign. It started on an ordinary morning, when he woke up feeling a strange mix of fear and hope. He had come a long way, and now he stood at a point where he needed to make the most important decisions of his life. For the first time in many years, he felt calm instead of confused. This calmness was not because his problems had disappeared, but because he had finally understood how to face them with strength. He walked outside and noticed how peaceful the world looked. The air felt different, as if life was giving him another chance. He thought about the people who had helped him during hard times. Their faces appeared in his mind one by one, reminding him that he was never alone, even when he felt lost. He remembered every moment when someone offered him support, guidance, or even a few kind words. Those small moments had slowly built the courage now growing inside him. He realized that the biggest fight was never with other people or situations. The biggest fight had always been with his own doubts, fears, and hesitations. Once he understood this, something inside him began to change. He stopped telling himself that he was not good enough. He stopped asking, "Why me?" and started asking, "What can I do now?" That small shift in thinking was powerful, and it opened the door to the last part of his transformation. He began taking small steps toward rebuilding his future. He created a routine that gave meaning to his days. Every morning, he set goals for himself, even if they were simple ones like finishing a task, learning something new, or speaking positively to someone. These small goals helped him slowly regain control of his life. He had learned that progress did not always require big jumps. Sometimes, the smallest steps made the biggest difference. There were still days when he felt tired. There were days when old memories returned and tried to pull him back into sadness. But instead of losing himself again, he reminded himself how far he had come. He used those memories as lessons, not as chains holding him down. Whenever he felt weak, he looked back at all the difficult moments he had survived. This gave him strength. As time passed, he began meeting new people who saw him differently. They did not judge him for his mistakes or failures. Instead, they saw his willingness to grow. They appreciated his honesty, his patience, and his new sense of responsibility. Being surrounded by positive people made him feel accepted and valued. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged somewhere. He also reconnected with people he had distanced himself from earlier. At first, he was nervous. He worried they might not forgive him. Or worse, they might think he had not changed, but he gathered courage and approached them with sincerity. He spoke openly about his journey, the mistakes he made, and the lessons he learned. He did not hide anything because he wanted them to see the real him. To his surprise, many people appreciated his honesty and welcomed him back with warmth. Their kindness touched him deeply and motivated him to become even better. Slowly, he rebuilt the trust he had lost. He understood that trust did not return in a single day. It required constant effort, consistency, and honesty. He did his best every day to show that he had truly changed. He worked harder, listened more, and respected the value of relationships. Over time, his actions spoke louder than any words, and people began to believe in him again. He also focused on improving his skills and knowledge. He spent more time learning things that could help him move forward. He watched educational videos, read articles, and practiced regularly. He knew that learning was the key to new opportunities. The more he learned, the more confident he became. Eventually, his hard work opened a door he never expected. He was offered an opportunity that had always seemed out of reach before. It was a position that required responsibility, discipline, and leadership. Many people considered him the right person because of the strength and patience he had shown. At first, he doubted whether he could handle it. But then he remembered everything he had overcome. He told himself, "If I made it this far, I can do this too." With that confidence, he accepted the opportunity and promised himself that he would give it his best. The new role was challenging, but he handled it with dedication. Every task he completed gave him more confidence. People around him noticed his sincerity and appreciated his effort. They often came to him for guidance, which made him realize how far he had come. He was no longer the confused and scared person from before. He had become someone others could rely on. As his life improved, he did not forget where he started. He remembered the days when he struggled, cried silently, and felt lost. Those memories became the foundation of his humility. He stayed grounded and never let pride take over. He also used his story to encourage others who were facing difficult times. He shared his experiences with them in simple words, reminding them that every struggle could become a lesson and every failure could become a turning point. One day, while sitting alone in a quiet place, he reflected on his journey. He thought about the moments when he almost gave up, the nights when he could not sleep, and the mornings when he felt exhausted. Then he thought about how he slowly learned to stand again, step by step. He realized that the journey itself had shaped him into a stronger, wiser, and calmer person. He smiled quietly, feeling a deep sense of peace. He now understood that life was not about being perfect. It was about learning, growing, and rising again after every fall. He also understood that real success was not measured only by achievements but by the strength it took to reach them. As the sun began to set, he made a promise to himself. He promised that he would never stop growing, never stop learning, and never forget the power of hope. He promised to stay kind, stay humble, and help others whenever he could. He knew that the road ahead would not always be easy, but he was ready for it. He had finally discovered his purpose, and he was determined to walk forward with confidence. With a calm heart and a hopeful mind, he took a deep breath and stepped into his future. And this time, he was not afraid. He was ready.